Hey, it's the Stick Figure Historian again, and welcome to episode 25 of the England series. So, before we speak of Charles' march on the town of Hull, it's fitting to mention that Parliament had made one final attempt at peace with the king. They sent to him yet another document, the 19 Propositions. It was a list of 19 powers, and they told Charles that if he would grant them these powers, he could return to London and rule as before, though he would not rule exactly as before. I will not bore you with going through each of the 19 things that Parliament was asking for. I shall simply summarize. They wanted basically all the power over military, church, and the government. In terms of the military, Charles was asked to disband his force, and any military officers he appointed over any town or fortress must be approved first by Parliament. In the realm of the Church, a complete reform of the institution was called for, which largely meant getting rid of Archbishop Laud's changes in bishops, and it was demanded that Catholics be more vigorously persecuted. They even asked that the children of Catholics must be taught by Protestants, instead of allowing their parents to teach them how they believed was right. And finally, in terms of government control, well, let's just say Charles would have been made into little more than a puppet or a figurehead if he agreed to the terms. Parliament wanted to choose his Privy Council members, have any important decisions in the kingdom made only by themselves, and if Charles appointed anyone to basically any office of importance, you guessed it, Parliament had to approve it. And not only all this, but they demanded to have control of the royal children's education. No doubt, you know something of the king's character by now, and it will come as no surprise to you that none of this sat very well with him. It was really a lot to ask from anyone, let alone someone who was used to having large amounts of power. He rejected all the propositions. But this had all happened in June. It was July now, and Charles came marching to Hull. He came in high spirits, banners flying as the troops marched along behind him. And why shouldn't he? Only a matter of time, he supposed, and the arsenal would be his. A victory against his usurping foes, and not a shot would have to be fired. But if we can call Charles the stubborn, perhaps also we could call him the luckless. It turns out that Parliament had sensed some wavering in the loyalty of the governor of Hull, and had sent another man, Sir John Meldrum, to help protect the city from the royalists. If Hotham truly had been planning on handing the city over to the king, all hope of that was lost now. Charles met with keen disappointment when he found the strong resistance put up against him. The town had been strengthened as far as possible against attack. Sir Meldrum had even ordered one of the sluices holding back the River Humber to be opened. The whole countryside surrounding the town walls was a swampy mess. Long story short, despite all efforts of the royalists, Hull never surrendered. Indeed, instead of the king gaining their arsenal, a small party actually sallied out from within the walls and blew up one of the king's own smaller camp arsenals, also making off with several of his cannons. It was a 4-week-long disaster. The following month found Charles and his troops at Nottingham. As yet, no war had formally been declared, but now the king was ready. He raised his royal standard and declared Parliament and all their supporters as traitors and rebels that must be put down. But as the princely banner waved over the heads of the cheering troops, it suddenly fell over. Not a strange thing. It had not been planted firmly enough in the ground, and the force of the wind simply knocked the flagpole down. But there were some people in the crowd, superstitious fellows, that viewed it as a bad omen. They thought it was perhaps a sign that the king would lose the war. Of course, we know this is ridiculous, for a flagpole blowing over does not mean anything. But the question probably still remained in the heads of more sensible people. Would the king win this war? The answer will be revealed to us in the following episodes. It's a long story, sometimes sad, but also filled with much courage and adventure.